Zarek stared at her reflection in the polished surface. The ceremonial robes felt heavy on her slender blue frame. Today was the day she would marry a human, and she hated everything about it. "It is time, Diplomat Zarek," said an attendant, bowing slightly. Zarek nodded stiffly. As the daughter of Senior Counselor Venpor, she understood duty. The war between Navorians and humans had cost millions of lives on both sides before ending in stalemate 3 months ago. Now, political marriages were part of the peace agreement. Important Navorians would marry important humans to create bonds between their species. She was a sacrifice for peace. Nothing more. The Concordia space station hummed with activity as she walked toward the ceremony hall. Diplomats from both species filled the corridors, watching her with curious eyes. Humans looked so strange to her with their varied skin colors and hair. Their emotions showed plainly on their faces, something Navorians considered vulgar. "Remember your duty," her father had told her before leaving her to prepare. "This marriage will help stabilize relations. Your discomfort is a small price for our people's safety." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one marrying a human. The ceremony hall doors loomed before her. Inside waited Lieutenant Daniel Carter, the human soldier who would become her husband. She had seen his image during briefings but had never spoken to him directly. He was a decorated officer who had volunteered for this arrangement, probably seeking promotion, she thought bitterly. Or worse, he viewed marrying her as some kind of trophy, claiming an alien wife as humans might claim new territory. The doors slid open, and Zarek lifted her chin. The hall was divided clearly, humans on one side, Navorians on the other. No mingling, no friendly conversation, just tense political necessity, and there he stood at the center, Lieutenant Daniel Carter in his formal military uniform. He was taller than she expected, with short brown hair and a straight posture that spoke of military discipline. His face revealed nothing as he watched her approach. Good. At least he wasn't smiling falsely. As she walked toward him, Zarek heard the whispers from the human side. Poor Carter, having to touch one of them. Wonder if they're cold-blooded. She pretended not to hear, though her translator implant caught every word. Humans always assumed Navorians couldn't understand their whispers. Her crystalline blue skin might look alien to them, but her hearing worked perfectly fine. Daniel Carter watched her approach with careful eyes. He didn't flinch when she took her place beside him. That was something, at least. Ambassador Lin stepped forward to conduct the human portion of the ceremony. "We gather today to witness the union of Lieutenant Daniel Carter of Earth and Diplomat Zarek of Navoria. Their marriage represents our shared commitment to lasting peace between our peoples." The words felt empty to Zarek. This wasn't a marriage. It was a contract signed with personal freedom instead of ink. When it came time to exchange vows, Daniel spoke clearly and formally. "I, Daniel Carter, take you, Zarek, as my partner in this diplomatic union. I pledge to uphold the peace between our peoples and to treat you with respect. Not one word about love or affection." Good. At least he understood what this really was. When her turn came, Zarek recited the words she had practiced. "I, Zarek, accept this union with Daniel Carter in service to peace. I will fulfill my diplomatic duties and represent my people with honor." They exchanged simple metal bands, a human tradition they had agreed to follow. His fingers were warm against her cooler skin. She noticed he didn't rush the contact, but he didn't linger either. Professional, respectful distance. She could work with that. The Navorian portion followed, led by Elder Tolvak. They pressed their palms to a sacred crystal, their shared bioelectric energy causing it to glow, supposedly a symbol of harmony. The crystal glowed weakly. No one commented on this poor omen. When the ceremony ended, they turned to face the gathered officials. No one applauded. This wasn't a celebration, but a political formality everyone needed to witness. "May I present Lieutenant and Diplomat Carter Zarek," Ambassador Lin announced. Zarek cringed internally at the human naming convention now applied to her. Another small freedom lost. The reception that followed was equally stiff. They stood side by side, accepting congratulations neither of them wanted. "You're doing Earth proud, son," an older human military officer told Daniel, clapping him on the shoulder, while barely glancing at Zarek. "Thank you, General Peters," Daniel replied evenly. When the Navorian delegates approached, they addressed only Zarek in their language. "Your sacrifice honors the council," said one minister. "Your father sends his regards. Not his love, not his support. His regards," as if she had simply taken on an unpleasant assignment. Daniel surprised her by inclining his head respectfully toward the Navorian delegates, even if he couldn't understand their words. It was a small gesture, but more than most humans bothered. After 2 hours of diplomatic pleasantries, they were finally allowed to leave. A station officer escorted them to their new shared quarters in the diplomatic section of Concordia. "Your belongings have been moved in as requested," the officer said, opening the door to reveal a spacious living area. "If you need anything, just use the communication panel." When the door closed behind the officer, they were truly alone for the first time. The silence stretched between them like a physical barrier. Daniel finally broke it. "I know this isn't what either of us would choose," he said, his voice steady. "But I meant what I said in my vows. I will treat you with respect." Zarek studied him carefully. No hidden smile, no condescension she could detect. Just simple honesty. "I appreciate directness," she replied. "This arrangement is not personal. It is political. We should establish boundaries." He nodded. "Agreed. The quarters are spacious enough that we can maintain privacy. I can take the smaller bedroom." "That is acceptable." She paused. "We should also discuss schedules. I prefer early cycles for meditation." "I'm an early riser myself," he said. "Military habit, we can coordinate bathroom timing." They continued discussing practical matters. Meal preferences, work schedules, communication with their respective peoples. Nothing personal. Nothing that acknowledged they were now technically married. "One more thing," Daniel said as their conversation wound down. "In public, we should present a united front. Whatever our private feelings, others need to see this arrangement working." Zarek nodded. "Appearance is part of diplomacy. I understand the necessity." "Good." He hesitated. "Is there anything else you need tonight?" "No. I will retire now." He stepped aside, giving her clear path to her chosen bedroom. "Good night, Diplomat Zarek." She paused at her door. "Good night, Lieutenant Carter." Inside her room, Zarek removed the ceremonial robes and changed into comfortable Navorian sleeping clothes. She sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what had happened. She was married to a human, bound to him for as long as the peace treaty required, possibly years. She would not see her homeworld or family except through official visits. Her life was now entangled with a species she barely understood beyond diplomatic briefings. Daniel Carter seemed tolerable. Not friendly, but not hostile either. Professional. That was something she could work with. If they both treated this as the diplomatic assignment it was, perhaps it would be bearable. She turned off the lights and lay in darkness, listening to the faint sounds of Daniel moving in the other room. Strange to think of a human so close by while she slept. This was just the first day of many. Zarek closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. Whatever came next, she would face it with the dignity expected of a diplomat. And somewhere across their shared living space, Daniel Carter likely had similar thoughts as he prepared for sleep. Two strangers, now married. Two enemies, now partners. Both determined to survive what neither had truly wanted. 3 months passed on Concordia Station. Zarek and Daniel had settled into a careful routine that kept them orbiting around each other without truly connecting. They shared living space, but little else. Each morning, they politely exchanged brief greetings before heading to their separate diplomatic duties. In public, they performed their roles perfectly. They attended meetings side by side, presented united positions on joint human-Navorian projects, and never showed any sign of discord. Many diplomats praised their professional partnership, but in private they maintained their distance. Dinner was usually eaten separately. Conversations rarely moved beyond station business. They were strangers who happened to share an address. and a political purpose. Today marked exactly 3 months since their wedding. Neither mentioned this fact as they prepared for a routine inspection of Concordia's new cultural exchange center. The opening ceremony begins at 1400 hours, Daniel said, checking his tablet as they walked down the main corridor. Ambassador Lin expects us to give a short speech about cooperation. Zarak nodded. I have prepared appropriate remarks. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a crowd gathered outside the station's main cafeteria. Voices were raised in anger. What's happening? Daniel moved closer, Zarak following cautiously. A human security officer was arguing with a Navorian maintenance worker. Around them, both humans and Navorians were taking sides, the tension visibly rising. The Navorian accessed restricted areas without proper clearance. The security officer was saying loudly, "Standard protocol requires detention until we verify intentions." "I was fixing environmental controls as requested," the Navorian worker replied. "Your own chief engineer approved my work order." Daniel and Zarak exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of minor incident that could escalate quickly. "We should intervene," Zarak said quietly. Daniel nodded and stepped forward. "Officer, what seems to be the problem?" The security officer straightened when he recognized Daniel. "Lieutenant Carter, sir, just a security matter. This Navorian was found in a restricted section." "My name is Teklor," the worker said stiffly, "and I was there on official business." Zarak moved beside Daniel. "Perhaps we can verify this easily. May I see the work order?" The Navorian handed over a tablet. Zarak examined it, then passed it to Daniel. "The authorization appears legitimate." Daniel studied it and nodded. "Officer, the work order is properly signed by Chief Engineer Rodriguez. This appears to be a misunderstanding." The security officer looked embarrassed. "I wasn't aware the authorization had been processed. My apologies." The crowd began to disperse as Daniel and Zarak smoothly handled the situation. They spoke briefly with both the officer and the worker, ensuring neither felt disrespected, before continuing on their way. "That could have turned ugly," Daniel said when they were alone again. "Yes, minor misunderstandings too easily become major incidents when tension exists," Zarak replied. Daniel gave her a considering look. "We work well together in these situations." It was the first personal comment he had made in weeks. Zarak wasn't sure how to respond, so she simply nodded. They reached the cultural center and spent the next 2 hours meeting with the staff and reviewing the exhibits. Everything was ready for the opening. As they finished their inspection, Daniel's communicator beeped urgently. "Lieutenant Carter here," he answered. "Emergency in Sector 7, came a tense voice. "Multiple system failures. We need all available personnel." Daniel looked at Zarak. "We should go. Sector 7 houses critical life support systems." They hurried through the station, passing worried staff members heading in the same direction. When they reached Sector 7, chaos greeted them. Warning lights flashed and alarm sounds filled the air. "What happened?" Daniel asked a frantic technician. "Sabotage," the woman replied. "Someone deliberately damaged environmental controls and sealed several emergency bulkheads. We're locked out of the main systems." Zarak frowned. "Where is the damage centered?" "Subsection 3, but we can't get in. The bulkheads are down." Daniel studied the station schematic on a nearby screen. "There's a maintenance tunnel that might bypass the lockdown. We could try to reach the controls that way." "I'll go with you," Zarak said immediately. Daniel looked surprised but nodded. "We'll need to hurry. Oxygen levels in several sections are already dropping." They collected emergency gear and found the maintenance access point. The tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, forcing them to crawl single file through the cramped space. "According to the station plans, we need to go 50 meters ahead, then turn right," Daniel said, leading the way. The tunnel grew warmer as they progressed. Behind them, they heard a loud clang, followed by the hiss of sealing doors. "That didn't sound good," Daniel muttered, looking back. Zarak checked her scanner. "The tunnel has sealed behind us. Someone is actively controlling the systems." "Extremists," Daniel said grimly. There have been rumors of a group opposed to the peace treaty, both human and Navorian. They reached the turn and found another sealed door blocking their path. "We're trapped," Zarek stated flatly. Daniel tapped his communicator but received only static. "And cut off from communication." They looked at each other in the dim emergency lighting. For the first time, they were completely alone, with no diplomatic duties to hide behind. "The oxygen will eventually run out," Zarek said calmly. "These tunnels are not designed for extended occupation." Daniel nodded, his expression serious, but not panicked. "We have about 3 hours of air at normal consumption rates. Let's conserve by staying still and thinking through our options." They sat on the tunnel floor, backs against opposite walls, knees almost touching in the narrow space. After a long silence, Daniel surprised her. "Maktor Valen Shri," he said carefully. Zarek's eyes widened. "You speak Navorian?" "Just a little," he admitted. "I've been learning in my free time." "Why?" The question came out more sharply than she intended. Daniel shrugged. It seemed reasonable to understand my wife's language. Wife. The word hung between them. Neither had used such terms before. "Your pronunciation needs work," she finally said, "but the effort is appreciated." A small smile appeared on his face. "I didn't have anyone to practice with." "What were you trying to say?" "May calm minds find solutions," he replied. "It's a Navorian saying I read about." "Close. The correct phrase is Maktor Valen Shrel, and it's traditionally used when facing difficult problems together." The temperature in the tunnel continued to rise as life support systems throughout the sector failed. Daniel removed his uniform jacket, revealing a simple black t-shirt beneath. Zarek noticed a long scar running along his right arm. Seeing her gaze, he explained, "From the Battle of Proxima, Navorian energy weapon." Zarek hesitated, then shared her own story. "I have a similar scar on my shoulder. Human projectile weapon, from when our diplomatic convoy was attacked near Saturn's rings." Daniel looked at her with new understanding. "We've both paid for this war, yes, and now we pay for peace in different ways." The air grew thinner as they talked. They shared stories they had never told each other before. Daniel spoke of growing up in a small town called Riverside, raised by his grandmother after losing his parents in a shuttle accident. Zarek described the pressure of being a counselor's daughter, always expected to be perfect. "I never wanted to be a diplomat," she admitted. "I studied xenobiology before my father insisted I follow the political path." "Xenobiology? So you actually wanted to learn about other species?" "Yes, humans included. Your biology is fascinating, so adaptable compared to ours." Daniel smiled. "And here I thought you found us completely repulsive." "Not repulsive," Zarek clarified. "Just very different." The oxygen levels continued to drop. Their breathing became more labored, and conversation grew difficult. "We need to try something," Daniel said, examining the sealed door. "There's a manual override panel, but it's been damaged." Zarek moved beside him, studying the human technology. "If we combine this with Navorian methods," she removed a small tool from her belt, "my bioelectric field might activate the circuits if properly channeled." Together they worked on the door controls, Daniel's mechanical knowledge complementing Zarek's unique Navorian abilities. The minutes stretched on as their breathing grew more ragged. Finally, with a metallic groan, the door slid open a few inches, just enough to let them squeeze through. "You did it," Daniel said, genuine admiration in his voice. "We did it," Zarek corrected. They made their way to the environmental control room and, working together, managed to restore basic systems and alert station security to the sabotage plot. When rescue teams finally reached them, they found the Awar, human and Navorian side by side, exhausted but successful. That evening, back in their quarters, something had changed. The silence between them was no longer cold and defensive. "Would you like to share dinner?" Daniel asked, the question casual but significant. Zarak considered him for a moment. Yes, I think I would. As they prepared a simple meal together, neither mentioned how close they had come to death, nor did they discuss the hours spent talking in that tunnel. But when Daniel asked if she would teach him more Navorian phrases, Zarak agreed without hesitation. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was a beginning. 6 months into their arranged marriage, life on Concordia Station had fallen into a new pattern for Zarak and Daniel. They now ate most meals together, discussing their work and occasionally sharing stories from their respective cultures. Though, still careful around each other, the cold distance had melted into something like respect. Daniel continued learning Navorian phrases, practicing them during their morning meals. Zarak found herself looking forward to these sessions, correcting his pronunciation with increasing patience. She had even begun asking questions about human customs that puzzled her. "Why do humans touch each other's hands as greeting?" she had asked one evening. "It serves no practical purpose." Daniel had smiled. "Connection. Physical touch means something to us, shows we recognize each other as real." Zarak still didn't fully understand, but she found Daniel's explanations fascinating rather than strange. Everything changed when news came of a destroyed human research vessel near Navorian space. Tensions across the station immediately soared. Emergency meetings were called. Old accusations resurfaced. Daniel returned to their quarters late, his face grim. "The Human Council believes Navorian forces destroyed our science ship." Zarak looked up from her datapad. "That makes no sense. Why would we risk the peace treaty now? 17 researchers died." Daniel's voice was tight. "People want answers. And your military assumes Navorians are responsible." It wasn't a question. Daniel sighed. "I don't know what to believe." "Do you think I know something about this? That my people would tell me of attack plans?" Her voice grew colder than it had been in months. "That's not what I meant." Before they could discuss further, both their communicators signaled urgent messages. Daniel read his first, his expression darkening. "Admiral Clark wants to meet with me. Alone." Zarak's message was equally concerning. "My father has ordered my immediate return to the Navorian homeworld." They stared at each other, the fragile trust they had built suddenly on shaky ground. "Will you go?" Daniel asked quietly. Zarak hesitated. "Will you meet with your admiral?" Neither answered immediately. 6 months ago, their choices would have been clear. Duty to their own people would have come first. Now, things felt more complicated. "I'll meet Clark," Daniel finally said. "But I won't agree to anything that endangers the peace." "And I will speak with my father," Zarak replied. "But I will not leave Concordia unless absolutely necessary." They parted without another word, each heading to their separate meetings. Admiral Clark met Daniel in a secure room near the human section of the station. His expression was grave as he activated privacy screens. "Lieutenant, what I'm about to tell you is classified," Clark began. "We have reason to believe the Navorians are preparing for renewed conflict. The research vessel was just the beginning." Daniel kept his face neutral. "What evidence supports this, sir?" Clark pushed a data pad across the table. "Intelligence reports. Military movements near their border stations, unusual communications patterns." The evidence seemed compelling, but something felt wrong to Daniel. He thought of Zarak, of their conversations over the past months. The Navorians were cautious and sometimes cold, but they valued the peace treaty. An unprovoked attack made no strategic sense. "With respect, sir, this doesn't align with what I've observed from the Navorian diplomats." Clark's expression hardened. "You've grown too close to them, Carter. Remember where your loyalties lie." "My loyalty is to peace, sir. That's why I agreed to this marriage." "Your marriage was meant to give us insights into Navorian thinking. You're in a unique position to gather intelligence. That's what we need. Now." Daniel felt a chill. "You want me to spy on my wife?" "I want you to serve Earth's interests. Get close to her. Find out what she knows." Meanwhile, Zarek faced her father's stern face on a secure communication channel. "The situation has deteriorated," Counselor Venpor said without greeting. "Your diplomatic experiment has failed. Return home immediately." Failed? Father, until this incident, relations were improving. Humans cannot be trusted. They provoke conflict, then blame us. The Council believes they destroyed their own vessel as pretense for aggression. Zarek frowned. That makes little sense. I've seen no evidence. Evidence? Her father cut her off. What evidence could you gather living among them, being influenced by their emotions? You've been compromised, Zarek. The accusation stung. I have maintained my objectivity. Then prove it. Return home and share everything you've learned about human military capabilities. Zarek realized what her father was asking. He wanted her to betray Daniel's trust, to turn their shared life into espionage. Both returned to their quarters hours later, the weight of their meetings heavy between them. My father wants me to return home, Zarek finally said. My admiral wants information, Daniel admitted. They stood facing each other, the truth finally spoken. 6 months ago, they would have obeyed without question. Now, they hesitated. Do you believe your people destroyed the research vessel? Daniel asked directly. No. It gains us nothing and risks everything, Zarek answered. Do you believe humans would sacrifice their own for political advantage? Daniel shook his head. Not 17 innocent researchers. Then what really happened? They spent the night reviewing all available information about the incident. The ship's last known position, the debris pattern, the final transmissions. Look at this. Daniel pointed to a sensor reading. There's unusual radiation in the debris field, not consistent with Navorian weapons. Nor human weapons, Zarek confirmed. They exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. A third party, Daniel said. Someone who benefits from renewed conflict between our peoples. Further research revealed faint engine signatures near the attack site that matched neither human nor Navorian design. They belonged to the reclusive Taurians, a species that had lost territory to both humans and Navorians in past decades. We need to investigate this directly, Daniel decided. But neither the Human Council nor Navorian leadership will believe this theory without proof. They're too eager to blame each other, Zarek agreed. A dangerous plan formed. Without official approval, they used Daniel's military access codes to take a small research shuttle toward the attack site. If caught, both would be accused of treason. Yet neither hesitated. As they left Concordia behind, Zarek observed Daniel skillfully piloting the shuttle. His hands moved confidently across the controls. You're a good pilot, she noted. Part of military training, he replied, though I prefer ground operations. You served in many battles against my people? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Too many. They traveled in silence after that, both contemplating how strange it was to now trust someone they once considered an enemy. The journey took 14 hours through dangerous territory. When they reached the debris field, they worked methodically, collecting samples and scanning for evidence. Each piece supported their theory. This had been a Taurian attack disguised to implicate Navorians. As they finished gathering the final samples, proximity alarms blared. 3 Taurian fighters approached rapidly. They don't want witnesses, Daniel said grimly, rushing to the pilot's seat. Hold on. The shuttle shuddered as Daniel executed evasive maneuvers. Zarek worked the sensor station, feeding him information about the pursuers. 2 coming from port side. Daniel rolled the shuttle hard right, narrowly avoiding weapons fire. The shuttle wasn't built for combat, and their shields wouldn't withstand direct hits. Can you access the emergency beacon? Daniel called, his focus on flying. Zarek moved to the communications panel. Yes, but using it will alert both human and Navorian forces to our unauthorized mission. Better court-martialed than dead, Daniel replied. As Zarek prepared the beacon, a violent impact rocked the shuttle. Warning lights flashed across the console. Daniel fought to maintain control as they spun. We're hit. Stabilizers failing. I died. Ceiling panel broke loose during the violent maneuvers, swinging down toward Zarek. Without hesitation, Daniel lunged from his seat, pushing her clear. The heavy panel struck him instead, catching his shoulder and head. Zarek heard his pained grunt as he collapsed. Blood, red so different from Navorian blue, flowed from a gash on his forehead. Daniel. She moved to his side, pressing her hand against the wound. His eyes were unfocused, but he was conscious. Get us out of here, he managed. Zarek had basic pilot training but had never flown a human vessel. Still, she had no choice. She dragged Daniel to safety, then took the controls, activating the emergency beacon. As she struggled to pilot the damaged shuttle, her hand accidentally brushed Daniel's. In that moment of contact, something unexpected happened. Navorians were touch telepaths, but the ability usually required concentration and consent. Yet in this moment of crisis, with Daniel injured protecting her, their minds connected. Images flooded between them, his childhood memories, her diplomatic training, his grief over fallen comrades, her loneliness as a counselor's daughter. Every emotion, every thought laid bare. Daniel gasped as he experienced Zarek's perspective, the way humans appeared to Navorian senses, her initial disgust turning gradually to curiosity, then respect, then something deeper she hadn't acknowledged. Zarek felt Daniel's journey too. His initial resentment of their arrangement, his decision to learn her language, his growing admiration for her intelligence and principles. The evidence Zarek and Daniel collected proved beyond doubt that Taurians had destroyed the human research vessel. Recordings, debris analysis, and weapon signatures all pointed to the same conclusion. When presented to the Joint Human-Navorian Council, this evidence prevented what might have become a renewed war. Instead of being punished for their unauthorized mission, they were praised as heroes who had saved the peace treaty. Admiral Clark and Counselor Venpour both publicly thanked them for their courage, though privately neither was pleased that their espionage requests had been ignored. 2 weeks after their return to Concordia Station, Zarek and Daniel still hadn't discussed what happened during that moment of telepathic connection. They moved carefully around each other, unsure how to address what they had shared. One evening, Daniel found Zarek standing alone on the observation deck watching the stars. The blue glow of her crystalline skin reflected the starlight, making her seem part of the cosmos itself. "May I join you?" he asked quietly. Zarek nodded without turning. "The stars look different from Concordia than from my homeworld. The patterns are unfamiliar." Daniel stood beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Humans make pictures from star patterns. We call them constellations. Navorians do something similar." After a pause, she added, "You're keeping your distance." Daniel sighed. "I'm not sure what's appropriate after what happened." "The telepathic connection?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Zarek turned to face him directly. "Among my people, such connections are considered intimate, personal, usually shared only between family members or—" She hesitated. Or those who are truly bonded as life partners." Daniel's expression grew serious. "I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy." "You didn't. The connection formed because we both allowed it, even if unconsciously." She studied his face. "You saw my thoughts, my feelings, and you saw mine." Neither spoke for a long moment, acknowledging the truth they had both experienced. The initial resentment of their arrangement had evolved into something neither had expected. "I never thought I could respect a human," Zarek finally admitted. "Let alone feel something more?" Daniel finished quietly. Zarek nodded, her usual composure slipping. "It makes no logical sense." Daniel smiled slightly. "Humans have a saying, the heart has reasons that reason knows nothing of. Navorians prefer logic over emotion." "Do they?" "During our connection, I felt your people's passion for art, for beauty, for harmony. That's not so different from humans." Zarek considered this. "Perhaps our peoples aren't as different as we've been taught." Daniel cautiously reached toward her, palm up. offering but not demanding. Maybe that's why we were chosen for this arrangement. Someone saw potential for understanding between us. After a moment's hesitation, Zarek placed her blue hand in his. The touch was gentle, deliberate, not accidental like before, but a conscious choice. No telepathic connection formed this time. That would require deeper focus, but the simple contact held meaning for both of them. "What happens now?" she asked. "We decide what we want this marriage to be," Daniel answered. "Not what our governments planned, but what we choose." In the weeks that followed, they explored their relationship on their own terms. Daniel introduced Zarek to human music, playing recordings of classical piano that reminded her of certain Navorian harmonics. She taught him Navorian meditation, techniques that helped ease the nightmares he still had from the war. They began spending their free time together by choice, not obligation. When Daniel was assigned to help train a mixed human-Navorian security team, Zarek would sometimes watch the sessions, fascinated by his teaching style. When she hosted cultural exchange events, he would attend, proudly introducing himself as her husband, a word that no longer felt like a political label. Not everyone approved of their growing closeness. Some humans whispered that Daniel had gone native. Some Navorians suggested Zarek had abandoned her cultural purity. But for every critic, there were others who saw their partnership as a symbol of what might be possible between their species. 1 year after their arranged wedding, they received separate messages from their governments. "What does yours say?" Zarek asked, looking up from her datapad. Daniel's expression was serious. "I've been offered a promotion, position on Earth at Central Command. They say I've fulfilled my diplomatic obligation." Zarek felt a strange hollowness at his words. "My father writes that I've been appointed to the Navorian High Council. He expects me to return home immediately." The unspoken question hung between them. Was their time together over? Had the political purpose of their marriage been fulfilled? "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked, his voice carefully neutral. Zarek stood and walked to the window, gathering her thoughts. A year ago, she would have seized the opportunity to return to Navoria without hesitation. Now, "The High Council position has been my father's dream for me since childhood," she said slowly. "Never mine." "And what is your dream?" She turned to face him. "I once wanted to study xenobiology, to understand other species, not just negotiate with them." After a pause, she asked, "What about you? Is Central Command what you want?" Daniel shook his head. "I joined the military to protect Earth. I thought that meant fighting. Now I see that building understanding between our species protects both our worlds better than any weapon." They looked at each other, both realizing they had reached a turning point. "I don't want to return to Navoria," Zarek said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Not without you." Daniel crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Then I don't want Central Command. Not without you." That evening, they drafted responses, declining their respective offers and requesting continued assignment to Concordia. They proposed a new joint role as liaisons for human-Navorian cooperation projects. Their request caused considerable surprise among both governments, but their success in preventing the Tarian plot had earned them enough respect that approval eventually came. 2 days after the anniversary of their political wedding, they stood again in Concordia's observation lounge. This time, only Elder Tolvac attended as witness. There were no crowds, no political speeches, no cold formality. "The first ceremony joined your names," the elder said. "This one joins your paths by choice. Speak your true vows now." Daniel went first, his Navorian much improved after a year of practice. "Zarek, when we met, I saw only differences between us. Now I see connections I never imagined possible. You've shown me that understanding can grow even in unlikely places. I choose you as my true partner, not by command or duty, but with my whole heart." Zarek's voice was steady, but filled with emotion unfamiliar to her before meeting Daniel. "Daniel, I once viewed our arrangement as sacrifice. Now I see it as the greatest gift. You've taught me that there is wisdom in emotion just as there is feeling in logic. I choose you freely as my bonded one. Your path is my path." As was Navorian, Custom, they pressed their palms to the sacred crystal. This time, instead of the weak glow from their first ceremony, the crystal shone brilliantly, reflecting the genuine harmony between them. Later that night, in the privacy of their quarters, Zarek initiated a true telepathic bond, a deep connection shared only between Navorian life partners. She guided Daniel through the process, teaching him how to open his mind to hers. When their consciousness touched, there was no shock or surprise this time, only a profound sense of coming home. Human and Navorian, once enemies, now interconnected at the deepest level. "I never expected this," Daniel whispered when the connection eased, "to fall in love with someone from another world." "Nor did I," Zarek replied. "But perhaps that was the point all along. Not just peace between our species, but understanding. Connection." 6 months later, they accepted new assignments as co-commanders of the Harmony, the first joint human-Navorian exploration vessel. Its mission, to seek peaceful contact with other species, including the Taurians. As they prepared for departure, Zarek found herself reflecting on the irony of her situation. A political arrangement she had once dreaded had led her to the most meaningful relationship of her life. Being forced to marry a human had ultimately given her the freedom to choose her own path, and she had chosen Daniel, just as he had chosen her, not by command, not by duty, but by love.